Jamie moved to Cedar Grove, Ohio, looking to escape the hustle and bustle of the big city. This old-timey small town seemed perfect for that. After being there for a week, Jamie decided to go to church for the first time in a while. A local told her about Cedar Grove Baptist Church. On Sunday morning, Jamie wore a purple, modest dress and drove up to the church. It wasn't very big, but still had a gothic look. Jamie paused outside, admiring the architecture but also feeling nervous since it had been so long since she'd been in a church. After a minute, she gathered the courage to walk in. Pastor Elijah was giving a sermon on forgiveness and new beginnings. Going through that exact chapter in her own life, Jamie was deeply moved. At the end, the pastor was going around shaking everyone's hand. Jamie approached him and said, "I really enjoyed your sermon today. I've been going through a personal struggle myself, and it really resonated with me." Elijah noticed how beautiful she was, brown-skinned, with short braided hair, and an amazing figure. He replied, "Thank you. And your name is?" She answered, "Jamie." Elijah then said, "Well, Jamie, thank you for being here today. Hopefully, you decide to stay." Jamie noticed the tone in his voice and realized he still hadn't released her hand. She replied, "Yes, I plan on returning." Jamie also started noticing that Elijah was very handsome, a medium brown complexion, tall, and somewhat muscular. She got so lost in thought that she didn't realize she was smiling. Elijah started talking again. "Well, it was really nice to meet you, Jamie." That's when his wife, Rose, and their 2 daughters, a 4-year-old and a 3-month-old, walked up. Rose asked, "Honey, who is this?" Elijah responded, "This is Jamie. She's thinking about joining our church." Rose extended her hand and said, "Well, it's nice to meet you." Jamie shook her hand and replied, "Nice to meet you too, ma'am." Rose then took Elijah's arm and said, "Well, come on, honey, there's somebody I want you to meet." Elijah waved goodbye to Jamie and followed his wife. Jamie said bye and began to walk out of the church. Later on that day, Jamie is in her house eating dinner when she begins to think about Elijah. She thinks about his sermon. She thinks about how he looked at her and how long his hand rested on hers. It's too early to know, but she thinks to herself they may have some chemistry. A week later, Jamie was sitting in the back pew. At the end of the sermon, Pastor Elijah asked if anyone wants to get baptized or join the church. Jamie then gets up and walks to the front saying she wants to join the church. A week in, Pastor Elijah started asking Jamie to help out around the church more. He would ask her to help set up events, set up Bible study, or set up church festivals. And every time afterwards, he would personally thank her. Sometimes they would even stay a little longer and talk. Jamie loved those little interactions. Months go by, and one day after rehearsal for an upcoming church play, all the other actors were pretty much gone, and Elijah and Jamie were sitting back talking about life and God. As they were talking, Elijah says, "I really appreciate you, Jamie." Jamie blushes and says, "Thank you." Elijah walks up to her and they kiss. Elijah then quickly pulls away and says, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Jamie then grabs his hand and says, "It's okay." And Elijah kisses her again. She kisses him back. That was the start of their affair. Elijah and Jamie started meeting in other nearby towns after work and just talking and watching movies. And eventually they started having sex. Elijah started promising Jamie that he would divorce his wife and they would be together. Meanwhile, Rose started noticing Elijah's growing distance from her. He started going to work early and coming home late, and he stopped being intimate with her. And during church, when Elijah is talking about the love of his life, his eyes would sometimes wander away from her. Rose also started noticing at the end of church, when Elijah is talking to everyone, he seems to linger on Jamie the most. She also sees how Jamie always seems to linger on Elijah whenever he passed her. Noticing all this, she decides to confront Jamie. She was helping her clean tables after a festival. Rose asks Jamie if they could step away for a few minutes and have a private conversation. Jamie said sure, and they go to the hallway. Rose then says, "I don't know what's going on between you and my husband, but whatever it is, it's over with now." Jamie, pretending to be confused, says, "Excuse me." Rose says, "What, did you fart or something?" Jamie then says, "I'm just confused on what you were talking about." "What do you mean, whatever's going on between me and your husband?" Rose then says, "Whatever. You can play dumb." She then walks up close to Jamie. "But I'm telling you now, he is my husband, and you stop whatever you have going on with him. Do you understand me?" Jamie says, "I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am." Rose doesn't say anything, just looks her up and down, then walks away. Once her back is turned, Jamie then pulls out her phone and texts Elijah saying, "We need to talk." Later on that night, Rose, after tucking their children into bed, walked downstairs and sat by Elijah. She then said to him, "I know about you and Jamie." Elijah nervously says, "What are you talking about? There's nothing going on between me and Jamie." Rose then lets out a sigh and looks him dead in the eye and said, "Like I said to her, You can pretend nothing is going on, but I'm telling you now, anything y'all have going on is over with. I will tell the church." Elijah doesn't say anything. He just stares at her, and Rose turns back to the TV. 3 days later, Jamie and Elijah meet on the outskirts of the town. Jamie then told Elijah, "Your wife is on to us." Elijah then says, "I know. She spoke to me as well." Jamie says, "So what are we gonna do?" Elijah says, "I don't know. She told me if this relationship continues, she will tell the congregation. That'd be a huge scandal, and scandals are never good out here." Jamie worriedly says, "So are you saying that this has to end?" Elijah then grabs her hand and says, "No, I don't want this to end. To be honest, Jamie, I feel so happy with you. Honestly, I can't see my life without you." Small pause before says, "Jamie, I love you." Jamie, with a huge smile on her face, says, "Elijah, you really love me?" Elijah thinks about it for a moment, then shakes his head knowingly. Yes, I do." Jamie then pulls him in for a hug, then says, "I guess it's the best time to tell you. I'm pregnant." Elijah excitedly says, "Seriously? You're pregnant?" Jamie said yes. He then gives her a big hug and spins her in the air, then says, "I can't believe you're gonna have a baby." He then snaps back to the issue at hand. Rose, what is he gonna do about Rose? He knows she won't just let this go. Jamie, you're right. We need a plan. Elijah then says, "No, I'll handle this." Jamie, what do you have in mind? Elijah says, "I will talk to her, trying to get her to understand that I fell in love with you and I want us to be together. But I will make sure that her and the kids are well provided for and that the town would never know the real reason." Jamie says, "And if that doesn't work?" Elijah just looks at her, not saying anything. Jamie stares back at him, knowing exactly what he was thinking. She then says, "Hopefully it doesn't have to get to that point. But if it does, let me know, and we'll deal with it together." He puts his hands on her, and they touch their foreheads together. He says, "I will." The next day, Rose and Elijah had just dropped off the children at their grandparents' house. When they enter the house, Rose went to the kitchen to get a plate of the breakfast she made. Elijah sits on the couch, preparing himself for what he's going to say. Soon after, it starts thundering and raining outside, mirroring the storm going on inside Elijah's head. After a few minutes of sitting there, Elijah gets up and walks into the kitchen. Rose is sitting there eating a plate of eggs and watching TV. Elijah then says, "Rose, we need to talk." Rose then looks at him and says, "Okay." She turns the TV off and says, "What do you want to talk about?" Elijah then breathes in heavily and says, "I spoke to Jamie yesterday." Rose instantly stops eating, giving full attention to Elijah. Elijah then resumes speaking. "I know you're not going to like this, but Jamie and I are in love." Rose then gave a sarcastic chuckle. Elijah then said, "I know this is hard for you, but to be honest, our marriage hasn't been the same for about 2 years now, long before Jamie came to the picture." Rose says, "So that gives you the right to forsake the vows we made in front of our families, in front of the congregation, but most importantly in front of God? You're going to destroy this family because you think you love some bitch?" Elijah quickly but calmly says, "She is not a bitch. Jamie is a very caring and loving person. She listens to me, she understands me. I feel like I can be the real me around her more than I ever felt with you." They both just stare at each other for a few seconds. Then Elijah said, "But this doesn't have to be a scandal, Rose. We can get a divorce without anyone knowing the real reason. We could just say we fell out of love, and I'll wait before me and Jamie make it public. And I will make sure you and the kids are well provided for." Rose then starts crying and says, "Elijah, I love you and I know you love me. We've been going through a bit of a rough patch, but we can fix it. We can make it work." She then grabs his hand and says, "If you want me to be more affectionate, I can. If you want me to listen to you more, I will. Just please don't break up this family." But Elijah coolly removes his hand from hers and says, "I'm sorry, Rose, but it's too late for that." Rose then turns away from him and starts crying, neither one of them saying anything for a few seconds. All you can hear is the raindrops hitting the house and the crackling of lightning outside. Rose then breaks the silence and says, "Does she love you too?" Elijah looks at her and says, "Yes." Rose says, "Call her." Elijah responds, "What?" Rose says again, a little louder, "Call her. Invite her over. I want to hear it from her mouth as well." Elijah does exactly what she tells him to do, and 15 minutes later, they hear a knock at the door. Elijah opens it, and Jamie walks in. Rose turns towards them. She sees them greet each other with a hug and kiss. Rose's blood begins to boil as Elijah and Jamie walk into the kitchen holding hands. Rose then says, "So Jamie, is it true that you love my husband?" Jamie then looks up at Elijah's face, then says, "Yes, Miss Rose, I do." Rose then, "Jamie, you're a beautiful young woman. You can have any man you want. So why would someone like you go for a married man?" Jamie then, "Well, it wasn't planned. It just happened. And plus, Then Jamie puts her hand on her stomach. I want my child to know their father. Rose then looked at them with a shocked expression on her face. She then said, Child? Jamie shook her head and said, Yes. Rose then turned away from them again. Elijah then said, Now that you know the truth, can we get a divorce and put this whole thing behind us? Rose then said, Oh, you think you could have an affair on me, produce a child, then walk away like nothing ever happened? No, the whole town would know about this. Elijah then said, Come on, Rose, you don't have to do that. Let's just end this peacefully. Rose then responded, Oh no, no, honey. That ship has sailed long ago. There's no way I will let you and this little bitch run off into the sunset and have a happy ending while I must sit here and collect the pieces of my broken heart. If I'm going to suffer, y'all too will as well. Elijah then walks up to her, trying to calm her down, but she isn't hearing a word he's saying. While they are arguing, Jamie looks at their kitchen table and sees a large knife. She grabs it and says, If you don't want to listen to reason, then we'll just need to get rid of you. She pushes Elijah out of the way and tries to stab Rose. Rose quickly grabs her arm, and the two women start tussling. Elijah just stands there in shock, torn between Rose, his wife and the mother of his children, and Jamie, the love of his life and the mother of his unborn child. The two women were similar in strength, but Jamie, being considerably younger, was a bit stronger and was starting to overpower Rose. But before the knife is able to pierce her chest, she manages to move Jamie's hand away, then lands a knee to her stomach and punches her in the face. She then grabs her by the hair and throws her into a nearby table. Rose then grabs the knife and starts to approach Jamie. Elijah then screams, Stop! And runs at Rose. Rose then turns to him and slashes at him, cutting him open. She then kicks him away, saying, Stay out of this, honey. This will all be over soon, and we can go back to our normal life we had before this bitch came around and messed it up. Rose then starts walking towards Jamie, who was a bit disoriented. Her head was spinning, and she was bleeding a little bit. She looks up and sees Rose coming towards her with a knife. She then kneels down and starts trying to drive the knife into Jamie's chest. Jamie manages to grab her arm, but due to her delirious state, isn't fully able to knock Rose off. The knife is getting closer and closer to her chest, and Jamie begins to think, this is how she's going to die. As the knife is a few inches away from her chest, right before she plunges it in, a shot rings out. A bullet goes straight through Rose's chest, the blood splashing on Jamie's face. Rose, with wide eyes, coughs up blood and falls to the ground, gasping for air. Jamie looks up, and Elijah has a pistol aimed right at them. She gets up and gives Elijah a big hug, saying thank you. She was going to kill me. Meanwhile, Rose coughs some blood one more time before she stops breathing. Elijah dropped the gun and starts breathing heavily. Jamie then grabs him and says that he did what was needed to be done. Still panicking, Elijah says, She's dead. She's dead. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna say? Jamie then says, We can say that she tried to kill us. We both have the wounds to prove it. We can say I was over here to discuss plans for y'all's anniversary, and she thought there was something going on between us. She snapped and tried to kill us, but you saved us. Elijah calms down a bit and says, Yeah, that is a good plan. They then called the cops, and in about 10 minutes later they show up. Jamie did most of the talking. Elijah just confirmed her claims. Once they left the police station, Jamie told Elijah, We'll have to lay low for a while. We can't have meetings outside of church. Elijah responds, Why? Jamie then says, Because they will be watching us and we don't want to give them any reason to suspect anything. A week after Rose's death, they have a funeral for her. The entire town shut off. Elijah plays the role of a grieving husband, and Jamie pretends to be very remorseful. Jamie and Elijah stuck to the plan. They didn't speak to each other outside of church, and even then it was small moments, mainly just to check up on each other and see how the other is doing. After a few months, Jamie, now heavily pregnant, moves out of the town first, saying she can't handle the guilt of what happened, and half the people there anyway believe she killed Rose. Then a few weeks after that, Elijah moves as well, stating everything in the town reminds him of Rose and he just needs to get away. Everybody wishes them individually the best of luck. Jamie and Elijah meet up in the city, greeting one another with a big hug and a kiss. Elijah, Jamie, and the kids move out of Ohio and go to Florida, where Jamie gives birth to their son Eli, and they have 2 more children together, a son named Eric and a daughter named Jasmine. Elijah also starts his own church. He calls it New Beginnings Baptist Church. 2 years later, the church became huge, and Pastor Elijah became a household name, and Jamie opened up a nail salon. It quickly became known for making even the ugliest nails look spectacular. On a warm summer day, Elijah and Jamie are sitting on their lounge chairs while the children play in the water. They drink champagne while holding hands. Elijah then said, I never thought I would have a life as good as this. Jamie then puts her head on his shoulder and says, Me either. Then they look at their children as they play in the water,